Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us get back to our main character. It was one of those nights when the city never really slept, yet everything felt frozen in time. Rain drummed softly on the empty streets, neon lights bleeding across puddles like fading dreams. Lila Monroe pulled her scrubs tighter around her body as she stepped out of the community clinic, exhaustion pressing on her shoulders. It was past midnight. She had just finished a double shift, her feet sore, her paycheck already spent on rent that was 3 days overdue. The street was silent except for the hum of a flickering lamp. That was when she saw him. A man lying motionless near the curb, rain pooling around his coat, his face pale beneath the streetlight. For a heartbeat, she froze. Then instinct took over. Lila rushed forward, kneeling beside him. "Sir? Can you hear me?" she said, her voice trembling. No answer. His pulse was weak, his hands ice-cold. She dialed emergency services, her soaked hair clinging to her cheeks. When the ambulance arrived, she climbed in beside him, her hand still pressed to his wrist, refusing to let go until they reached the hospital. Hours later, under the harsh white light of the doctors said he would make it. Severe dehydration, exhaustion, no ID, no family. Just another forgotten soul. But something about him stayed with her. Maybe it was the faint scar along his jaw, or the quiet way he had whispered, "Thank you," before slipping back into unconsciousness. The next morning, she returned to check on him, only to find the bed empty. The nurse at the desk shrugged. "He left before sunrise," she said. Lila stood there, unsure why that hollow feeling spread through her chest. Days turned into weeks. She went back to her routine: long shifts, short sleep, and a constant battle against bills. Until one Friday evening, as she was locking up the clinic, a sleek black car stopped in front of her. The door opened, and the same man stepped out, but this time, he was different. His hair was neatly combed, his posture confident, a dark suit hugging his frame. For a moment, she did not recognize him. Then he spoke, his voice deep but familiar. "Miss Monroe," he said, "we meet again." Lila blinked, her heart skipping. You are the man from that night." He nodded, offering a faint smile. "Ethan Hale. And I owe you more than you know." She frowned, still processing the transformation. The rain-worn stranger she had saved had vanished, replaced by someone who looked like he belonged in glossy magazines. "You did not owe me anything," she murmured. But he shook his head. "Actually, I do. And I am here to ask you for something impossible." He reached into his briefcase and placed a document on the counter between them. The paper gleamed under the fluorescent light, bold letters at the top reading "Marriage Agreement." Lila stared at it, stunned. "This is some kind of joke, right?" Ethan's eyes softened. "I wish it were. But it is very real. I need a wife on paper for 30 days. He paused, his voice lowering. "And I want that person to be you." For a long second, the sound of the city outside faded, replaced by the thundering of her own heartbeat. That was the night everything in Lila Monroe's life began to change. For a long moment, Lila could not speak. The paper in front of her felt heavier than it should have been. A marriage contract? With a man she had pulled out of the rain only a few weeks ago? Ethan stood quietly, his eyes calm but unreadable. "You look terrified," he said softly. "You have every right to be. Let me explain." He gestured toward the small waiting area of the clinic. The evening light filtered through the windows, painting his tailored suit in gold. Lila crossed her arms, still skeptical. Ethan took a slow breath. "My grandfather founded Hale Properties. When he passed, he left a clause in his will that I must be married by the end of this quarter to inherit the controlling shares. It is ridiculous, I know. I left the company months ago after discovering corruption in the board. I wanted to see the world without my name, to know who I was without it. That was when you found me. You saved me, Miss Monroe, not just from the street but from myself. Lila stared at him, torn between disbelief and sympathy. So you want me to pretend to be your wife just so you can get your inheritance? Ethan met her gaze. Yes. I know how that sounds. But it would be purely contractual. No tricks, no expectations. I will pay off your debts, cover your mother's medical bills, and after 30 days, you walk away free. Lila's breath caught. How do you know about my mother? He hesitated. I made a few calls. I wanted to understand the woman who stopped for a stranger in the rain. The honesty in his tone unsettled her more than the offer itself. I do not know if I can trust you, she whispered. Ethan nodded. You do not have to. Just think about it. He left the envelope on the counter and walked out, the sound of the car fading into the night. For hours, Lila sat in silence, staring at the paper. Her reflection in the glass door looked smaller than ever. The next morning, she visited her mother at the rehabilitation center. The machines beeped softly as her mother smiled weakly. You look tired, her mother said. Work keeping you busy? Lila nodded, forcing a smile. How could she explain the impossible choice sitting in her bag? That night, when the eviction notice arrived, taped coldly to her door, something inside her broke. By morning, she was standing in front of Hale Tower, clutching the contract in trembling hands. The marble lobby gleamed like another world. When the receptionist saw her name, she simply said, "He is expecting you." Moments later, Lila was led into a massive glass office overlooking the city. Ethan stood by the window, his suit immaculate, but his expression softer than she remembered. You came, he said quietly. Lila placed the envelope on his desk. I read it. I still think it is crazy. But I cannot let my mother lose her treatment. Ethan nodded once. Then we have a deal. He opened a drawer and pulled out a pen, the metal catching the sunlight. You can back out any time before we file the papers, he said. Lila took the pen, her hand shaking. Her signature looked fragile next to his bold one. Ethan extended his hand, formal but warm. Welcome to the arrangement, Mrs. Hale. The sound of that name made her heart flutter for reasons she did not understand. It is only for 30 days, she reminded herself. But as she looked at him, a quiet thought whispered in her mind nothing about this man, or this deal, felt temporary. Outside, the city kept moving, unaware that two strangers had just signed a contract that would change both of their lives forever. The following week unfolded like a dream Lila could not quite wake from. A black sedan arrived each morning, waiting by the curb of her small apartment. The driver called her Mrs. Hale with polite precision, even though the name still felt foreign on her tongue. Inside the car, silence often filled the air, except for the faint hum of city traffic. Ethan sat beside her, every inch the composed businessman, reviewing files on a sleek tablet. His presence was calm but distant, like he had learned to live behind walls of control. Their first stop was a law office downtown, where two witnesses and a notary finalized the paperwork. The exchange was swift, professional, and strangely cold. When the notary pronounced them legally married, Lila's stomach twisted. It was done. She was now Mrs. Ethan Hale. Afterward, Ethan escorted her to Hale Tower's executive floor, where employees greeted them with cautious smiles. Rumors spread fast. She could feel the curious eyes following her, the whispers behind manicured hands. A nurse from the city clinic standing beside one of the wealthiest men in New York was a story too strange to ignore. But Ethan remained composed, introducing her as his wife without hesitation. My wife prefers to keep a low profile, he said at one meeting, his tone firm enough to silence speculation. That afternoon, he brought her to a stylist. Racks of designer dresses lined the room, the scent of perfume thick in the air. "You do not need to change who you are," Ethan said quietly, "but the people we will meet can be ruthless. Let me protect you in the way they understand." Lila nodded, uneasy but moved by the sincerity in his voice. Hours later, she stood before a mirror, almost not recognizing the woman staring back. The simple scrubs and worn sneakers had been replaced by an elegant navy dress and heels that made her stand taller. When Ethan re-entered the room, he paused for a moment, his expression unreadable. "You look perfect," he said softly. She felt her cheeks warm. "I look like someone else." "Maybe," he replied, "but that someone will help us survive this." The following days were a blur of lessons. She practiced table etiquette, small talk, and the art of smiling without revealing nerves. Their evenings were quiet. He worked late while she sat by the window, reading or sketching in the small notebook she always carried. One night, she left the sketchbook open on the table, and when she returned, she found a note inside written in Ethan's neat handwriting. "You draw emotions better than most people speak them." She smiled, surprised by the gentleness of it. Their first public event came sooner than she expected, a gala hosted by the Hale Foundation. The ballroom shimmered with chandeliers, laughter, and the clinking of crystal glasses. Lila's heart pounded as they entered arm in arm. Cameras flashed, capturing every movement. "Just breathe," Ethan whispered near her ear. "You belong here as much as anyone." She nodded, forcing a smile. Halfway through the evening, a journalist cornered her with a sharp grin. "Mrs. Hale," he said, "is it true you were a nurse before this sudden marriage?" Some might call it a fairy tale. The implication was clear. Lila felt the burn of embarrassment rise, but she held her ground. "Yes," she said calmly, "and I still believe in helping people." Marrying Ethan did not change that. The man blinked, thrown off by her sincerity. Ethan stepped closer, placing a protective hand on her back. "My wife has a remarkable ability to make difficult questions sound small," he said coolly, leading her away. As the night ended, Lila stood on the balcony, the city lights glittering below. Ethan joined her, handing her a glass of water instead of champagne. "You handled yourself well tonight," he said. "You mean I survived without tripping over my dress," she replied, smiling. "No," he said, his eyes softening. "You made them see you. That is something I have not done in years." For a moment, neither spoke. The music drifted faintly through the open doors. The world below looked impossibly distant. Lila glanced at him and realized, maybe for the first time, that behind his calm mask, Ethan Hale was just as lost as she was. Days turned into weeks, and the lines between what was real and what was pretend began to blur. Each morning, Lila woke in the penthouse guest room that overlooked the skyline, sunlight spilling across the marble floor. Ethan's schedule was relentless: meetings, board calls, charity events, but he never failed to check on her. Sometimes, it was a quiet knock on her door and a soft question, "Did you sleep?" Other times, it was coffee left on the kitchen counter with a note, "Good luck with your errands." Little gestures, small and steady, slowly chipped away at the wall she had built around her heart. One evening, as a summer storm rolled in, lightning flickered across the windows. The mansion's lights flickered, then went dark. The silence was thick, broken only by the hum of distant thunder. Lila stepped into the hallway, her bare feet cold against the marble. "Ethan," she called. His voice echoed back from the study. "Generators out. Stay where you are, I will find some candles." She found him moments later, crouched by a drawer with a flashlight. In that dim glow, his features looked softer, younger, like the man she had met in the rain. "Here," he said, handing her a candle. "At least the view is nice." They stood by the window as lightning painted the sky silver. For once, there was no boardroom tension, no pretend smiles. Just quiet. "You know," she said, "I used to think money fixed everything. Now I see it just builds bigger cages." Ethan looked at her, his eyes unreadable. "I have spent most of my life building mine," he said quietly. Sometimes I wonder if anyone will ever let me out. The candlelight danced between them. The air felt fragile, heavy with something neither wanted to name. You should rest, he murmured, breaking the silence. But when she turned to leave, he reached out, gently touching her wrist. Lila, thank you. She met his gaze. For what? For treating me like a person when the world only sees my name. Her heart ached at the sincerity in his tone. Do not thank me for basic humanity, she whispered. You deserve it. The following morning, the city glittered after the rain. Lila found Ethan in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, making breakfast. You cook? She asked, startled. He smiled faintly. Once in a while. My mother taught me before she passed. She said pancakes solve most problems. He flipped one clumsily, and she laughed. The sound echoed, light and unguarded. Careful, she said, you might make me believe you are human. He looked at her then, eyes warm. Maybe I am starting to remember how. That evening, as they prepared for another event, Ethan handed her a small box. Inside was a delicate wooden ring carved with intricate lines. It is not much, he said, but I thought it would look more real than the plain band the lawyer gave us. Lila traced the wood with her fingers. You made this? He nodded. In college. I kept it for no reason. Maybe for this one. She slipped it on, feeling its light weight. It is beautiful, she said softly. It feels alive. He smiled, almost shy. Then it is perfect for you. That night, standing under the chandeliers once more, Lila noticed how naturally Ethan's hand found hers, how the cameras no longer frightened her. Every touch, every glance, felt less like an act and more like a confession. But just as the warmth between them began to feel safe, a flash of doubt crossed Ethan's eyes when a reporter mentioned his cousin Nathan's name. He excused himself abruptly, leaving her alone in a sea of glittering strangers. Later that night, when he returned, his face was pale, his jaw tense. Is everything all right? She asked. Ethan hesitated, then nodded. Just business, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Lila knew he was lying. Yet she said nothing, sensing that whatever haunted him was far deeper than a company feud. In the quiet that followed, she turned the wooden ring on her finger and wondered how long a lie could stay beautiful before it broke. By the time the next week arrived, Lila began to notice a shift in the air around the Hale Tower. Whispers followed her down the hallway, polite smiles turned sharper, and conversations stopped when she entered a room. It was not paranoia, something had changed. Ethan grew quieter too, often staring at his phone with a storm in his eyes. One evening, she found him alone in the study, sleeves rolled up, hands gripping the edge of the desk. The glow of his laptop screen lit his face in cold blue. Ethan, she asked carefully. He looked up, the weariness in his gaze startling her. It is Nathan, he said. My cousin. He is trying to push me out of the company. He has been leaking stories to the press about our marriage. About you. Lila's stomach dropped. What kind of stories? He hesitated, then turned the screen toward her. On the news site, her picture filled the headline, "The nurse who married a millionaire gold digger or genius?" Beneath it were paragraphs dissecting her background, her salary, even her mother's hospital bills. Her hands trembled. They are saying I trapped you, she whispered. Ethan's jaw clenched. None of this is true. I will fix it. But she shook her head, fighting tears. How? You cannot erase the internet. The next morning, reporters crowded outside the tower. Cameras flashed as she stepped out, questions flying like arrows. Mrs. Hale, did you marry for money? Were you his caretaker before the wedding? Security escorted her to the car, but the damage was done. Inside, she sat frozen, humiliation burning her cheeks. That night, she packed her things. When Ethan came home, he found her by the door, suitcase beside her. Where are you going? He demanded. Somewhere they will not call me a liar, she said quietly. You promised this would not hurt anyone. But it has. It has destroyed everything I have left. Ethan stepped closer. Lila, please. Give me time. I will make them see the truth. Her eyes filled with tears. You cannot buy the truth, Ethan. You can only live it. For a moment, he looked like the man she first met on that rainy night, lost, vulnerable, human. If you walk out that door, he said softly, I will not stop you. But I need you to know I never meant for this to happen. She swallowed hard, then turned away. Neither did I. The door clicked shut behind her, leaving him in the silence of his own empire. Days passed, and the story exploded online. Nathan used every opportunity to smear Ethan's name, calling the marriage a sham. Stocks began to fall, investors pulled out, and the board grew restless. Meanwhile, Lila moved back into a small apartment near the clinic, working long shifts again. Her co-workers whispered but never asked. She smiled through the pain, pretending she had not left her heart behind. One night, after another exhausting shift, she found an envelope slid under her door. No name, just a wax seal embossed with the Hale crest. Inside was a single key and a note in Ethan's handwriting, come to the old townhouse on Maple Street. Midnight. Please. Against her better judgment, she went. The street was quiet, bathed in the soft glow of streetlights. When she stepped inside, the lights flicked on, revealing a familiar warmth. Photos lined the mantel, pictures of her mother's rehab center, the community clinic, and volunteers holding blueprints. Ethan stood near the fireplace, his suit rumpled, eyes tired but alive. What is this? She asked. He took a deep breath. Proof that I meant every word. I bought this building for your clinic. It is called the Hope Center. No more rent, no more eviction notices. You deserve stability, not pity. Her lips parted, speechless. Why are you doing this? Because when I lost you, he said, I realized money means nothing without meaning. You gave me that. For a moment, the distance between them dissolved. Lila stepped closer, tears shining in her eyes. Ethan, I did not want your money. I just wanted the truth. He nodded. Then let me give you that too. From his pocket, he pulled out the wooden ring, its surface now polished smooth. Our contract ended last week. But if you let me, I would like to start again without papers, without lies. Lila stared at the ring, her heart pounding. And if I say no? Ethan smiled sadly. Then I will still make sure the Hope Center stands. Because your kindness deserves a home. Silence filled the room, heavy and tender. Lila looked around, at the walls that seemed to breathe with purpose, and then back at the man who had once been a stranger in the rain. Maybe, she whispered, it already has one. The following days felt like living in the space between heartbreak and hope. Lila returned to the clinic, throwing herself into work, pretending that her nights were not haunted by Ethan's face. The tabloids eventually moved on to other scandals, but the ache remained. Every time she passed the old townhouse, now marked the Hope Center, she could not help glancing inside. Volunteers had already started renovations, painting walls and installing shelves. She told herself it was enough that helping others through Ethan's gift was her closure. Yet deep down, she missed him. Ethan, on the other hand, had disappeared from public view. After the scandal, he withdrew from Hale Properties completely. Nathan took temporary control, and news outlets speculated that Ethan Hale had vanished for good. What few people knew was that he spent those weeks repairing what could not be seen: his integrity. When the board summoned him to a final hearing, he arrived not with lawyers, but with evidence. Emails, bank transfers, and recordings exposing Nathan's fraud. The proof was undeniable. As the board erupted in shock, Ethan's voice remained steady. This company was built on my grandfather's values: honesty and service. If I cannot uphold that, I would rather walk away than rule it. And with that, he resigned, leaving behind the empire that had once defined him. 2 days later, Lila received another envelope. Inside was a short letter written in Ethan's unmistakable handwriting. If you ever wonder what happened next, come to the Hope Center at dusk. She almost did not go. Her heart warned her it might be too painful. But curiosity, or maybe something deeper, guided her steps. The evening light bathed the building in amber when she arrived. The once empty rooms were now filled with warm fresh paint, wooden furniture, and the soft hum of laughter. Volunteers were cleaning up after the opening ceremony. Near the back of the hall, standing beside a plaque with her name engraved on it, was Ethan. He looked different, simpler somehow, wearing a gray shirt with the sleeves rolled up, no tie, no armor of wealth. When he saw her, a quiet smile touched his lips. "You came," he said. "You invited me," she replied, her voice soft but steady. He stepped closer, holding out the wooden ring she had left behind. "This belongs to you." She hesitated, her fingers brushing the smooth surface. "You kept it all this time?" "I kept everything that reminded me what mattered," he said. "Lila, I made too many choices based on fear of losing my company, my image, control. But when I lost you, I learned that love is not control. It is faith." Her throat tightened. "Ethan, you do not owe me anything. You already gave me more than I ever asked for." He shook his head. "What I gave you was repayment. What I am offering now is my heart." He took a breath, emotion raw in his voice. "I know our beginning was built on a lie. But the love I feel for you is the truest thing I have ever known." The air between them felt charged, like the pause before rain. Lila searched his face, looking for deception, but found only truth. "And if I say yes?" she whispered. Ethan smiled faintly. "Then we start from here. No contracts, no pretense. Just two people trying again." She looked around the bright lights, the laughter from the volunteers, the sign that read "The Hope Center founded in gratitude." For the first time in months, she felt peace instead of fear. Slowly, she slipped the ring back on her finger. "Then let us begin again," she said. He reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining as the sounds of the city drifted through the open doors. Outside, the first drops of rain began to fall, soft and steady, just like the night they met. Ethan looked up at the sky, then back at her. "Funny," he said, "the rain does not feel cold anymore." Lila smiled, tears shining in her eyes. "That is because this time, you are not standing in it alone." And for the first time since that fateful night, both of them finally felt at home. Months passed, and life at the Hope Center bloomed like spring after a long winter. What began as a quiet building filled with dust and echoes had turned into a sanctuary for people who needed second chances. Lila managed the center with the same compassion that had guided her since that night she found Ethan in the rain. She worked long hours, but every smile, every story of recovery, made it worth it. Ethan was always there, not as a CEO but as a man who finally found purpose beyond profit. He helped organize fundraisers, repaired shelves, and sometimes cooked breakfast for the volunteers. The sight of him in rolled-up sleeves, serving pancakes, had become a kind of legend among them. Yet not everything was easy. There were still days when the past crept in, the whispers about the scandal, the lingering doubts about their unconventional beginning. Some donors questioned if the Hope Center was a public project or a love story disguised as charity. But Lila had learned that actions silence rumors faster than words. Every month, she hosted community dinners, inviting families, nurses, and even former patients. Each event ended the same way, with laughter echoing through the hall and the reminder that kindness always finds its way home. One crisp autumn evening, Lila sat on the front steps of the center, sipping coffee as the city lights flickered on. Ethan joined her, his jacket draped over his arm. "Do you ever think about what might have happened if you had not stopped that night?" he asked. She smiled softly. "You mean if I had walked past a stranger in the rain?" "Yes," he said, his tone thoughtful. "Maybe I would still be lost. Lila looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. And maybe I would still be afraid to believe that people can change. He reached over, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. We both changed, he said. You taught me that love is not about possession, it is about promise. She leaned her head on his shoulder, the warmth between them quiet and real. Then promise me something, she said. No more secrets. No more secrets, he repeated, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. The evening breeze carried the faint hum of the city, mingling with the laughter from inside. They sat in silence for a while, watching the headlights move like fireflies across the streets below. For once, the world felt balanced, no contracts, no conditions, just the slow rhythm of two hearts that had finally found peace. And as the night deepened, Lila whispered the words that had lived in her chest since the beginning. I never saved you, Ethan. You saved me. He smiled, eyes glimmering in the dim light. Then I guess we are even. Winter came quietly, wrapping the city in silver and white. The Hope Center glowed against the snow like a lantern in the dark, a symbol of everything Lila and Ethan had built together. On the anniversary of its opening, they hosted a charity gala, not in a ballroom filled with glass and gold, but right inside the center itself. The walls were strung with lights, tables covered in handmade decorations crafted by the children they had helped. Lila wore a simple ivory dress, her hair pinned loosely, while Ethan stood beside her in a dark suit, looking at her as though she was the only thing in the room that mattered. As guests arrived, reporters whispered, remembering the headlines from the year before, but this time there was no scandal to feed on, only admiration. When the mayor gave a short speech praising their work, Lila caught Ethan's eye and smiled. The world had judged them once, but now it celebrated them. Later that night, when the guests had left and the music faded, they walked through the quiet halls together. Lila stopped by the framed photo that hung in the entryway. It was from the first day they had opened, the two of them standing in front of the door, rain still glistening on their shoulders. You know, she said, I still cannot believe how far we have come. Ethan's smile was gentle. I can, he said. Because you never stopped believing when I did. She turned toward him, her voice soft. And what do you believe in now? He took her hand, fingers interlocking with hers. In us, in what we make together. In every life this place will touch. The lights above flickered slightly, casting a warm glow over their faces. Ethan reached into his pocket, pulling out the small wooden ring, the same one that had once symbolized a contract. There was a time when this was just an act, he said. A lie I told the world to save my pride. But tonight, it is the only truth I want to live. Lila's eyes filled with tears as he knelt before her, not with grand gestures or expensive diamonds, but with the same humility that had drawn her to him from the beginning. Lila Monroe, he said quietly, I once asked you to marry me out of desperation. Now I am asking you out of love. Will you marry me? For real this time? The world seemed to hold its breath. Lila covered her mouth, her heart swelling. Yes, she whispered. 1,000 times yes. Ethan stood, slipping the wooden ring back on her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting all along. Outside, snow began to fall harder, blanketing the streets in silence. They stood by the window, watching it drift down like confetti. Ethan wrapped his arm around her shoulders. Looks like it is raining again, he murmured. She laughed softly. Then it must be fate. And for the first time since that cold night under the city lights, they both knew the story that began as a contract had become something far greater, a promise written not on paper, but in the heart. Spring arrived with a quiet grace, melting the snow that had blanketed the city for months. The Hope Center was busier than ever, its halls filled with laughter, footsteps, and the hum of new beginnings. Lila walked through the corridors one morning, stopping by the community kitchen where volunteers served breakfast. The smell of coffee and fresh bread filled the air, and for a moment, she just stood there, taking it all in. Her eyes caught the sunlight reflecting off the plaque near the entrance. It read, Founded by Ethan and Lila Hale, built on hope. A small smile curved her lips. Not long after, she stepped outside to find Ethan standing by the garden, sleeves rolled up, helping a group of teenagers plant flowers. He looked up as she approached, his grin warm and effortless. "Morning, Mrs. Hale," he said. She laughed. "You really like saying that, do you not?" "Every single time," he replied, brushing dirt off his hands. Together, they watched as the students planted a small cherry blossom tree, the same kind that grew outside the hospital where they first met. "It will bloom every year," Ethan said softly. A reminder of how something fragile can still grow strong. Lila looked at him, her heart full. Just like us. Life had not turned into a fairy tale. There were still challenges, funding deadlines, long nights, and the endless effort of keeping a dream alive. But they faced everything together, not as two people from different worlds, but as partners. That evening, they hosted a small ceremony under the blooming tree to celebrate 1 year since their real wedding. Friends, staff, and families gathered, laughter echoing under the twilight sky. When the music quieted, Ethan took Lila's hand and led her to the front. "You once told me you did not save me," he said, his voice steady but full of emotion. "But you did. You saved me from a life without purpose, without love, without truth." Lila blinked back tears. "And you showed me that love is not about wealth or power. It is about choosing someone, again and again, even when life gets hard." The guests applauded softly as Ethan leaned in and kissed her, a kiss that carried the weight of everything they had overcome. As the night deepened, lanterns floated into the sky, their lights reflecting on the glass windows of the Hope Center. Children cheered, and someone whispered, "It looks like stars are being born." Lila rested her head on Ethan's shoulder, watching the lights drift higher. "Do you ever think about how it all began?" she asked. He smiled. "A rainy night. A stranger who refused to walk away. I think about it every day." She smiled too, her fingers tracing the wooden ring that still gleamed on her hand. "Then maybe that was never a mistake," she whispered. Ethan nodded, his gaze tender. "No," he said. "It was the best decision I ever made." The camera of life pulled back, leaving them beneath the soft glow of lanterns and the quiet rustle of spring leaves. Some stories start with contracts and end with promises. Theirs began with a storm and ended in forever.